Right, pretty much. All right, now we're live, is what it says. Live with 0 viewers, so inconsequential. All right, so for our prosperity, we posted up. Everyone knows Zero Charisma. The movie came out in 2013. It was a Nerdist production, and what I want to do is to engage in that conversation of nerds, hipsters, and sort of where the hobby has gone through the ages. And from, I think, everyone's perspective, we agree that that movie really solidified what had been going on for, probably the last 3 years, right? When it came out, 2010 really saw an uptick in a different kind of nerd and a different kind of gaming. And if you haven't seen the movie, you definitely got to go watch the movie, or you're not going to understand probably a goddamn thing we're going to discuss tonight. It's going to be lost on you, because I think most people are going to assume this is like The Gamers, which it's nowhere near anything like The Gamers. No. So real fast, we can go around and just, again, just give everyone your name and sort of how long you've been gaming, right? So everyone's Scott, and I've been doing this, Jesus Christ, like 30 years now, since I was 8.
Before your voice dropped?
Before my voice dropped, yep. Yeah, we got introduced to it by my brother, the brother of a kid that I hung out with and skated with, and it was a quick induction into Satanism, and yeah, so there we go. Anthony?
I started playing in '83, again introduced by a friend whose brother had introduced him, and I won't tell you how old I was then, but I was a little bit than 8, and my voice had dropped, but apparently I've lost it now. And yeah.
Awesome. Chris?
I started gaming, I don't know, early 90s, middle school. Some friends were gamers and invited me over to their table. You can find me now with the Rocky Mountain Savages, the Savage Cast, all that good shit.
Outstanding. Yeah, I put that down. I was like, God damn, I'm pretty sure that's where he's from, but I'm going to take a wild spit in the wind. All right, and last but not least, Jamie.
I started, probably when I was around, I think I was 11 or 12, so 20-something years, 25, 26 years, whatever the hell that works out to be.
Nice. So that's good, because none of us are new gamers, and that will give us probably a different, I would dare say, a millennial gamer. So
yeah, we don't
for the
have
film. What? Go ahead. Right? We don't,
all the cool
but
and their chest tattoos.
Right, and that's the thing. But I dare say that I think all of us have probably played, the more recent games. I know Anthony does a lot of the Star Wars, and he does a lot of the more indie style games. I guess not a lot, but you at least have the experience.
I like
same
to
for me, Chris. Yeah, right. Yeah. So, in your channel's filled with actually a lot of good reviews, quite honestly. Chris, besides Savage Worlds, do you do anything outside of that?
In the game realm, came from GURPS, started in D&D 2nd Edition. I've dabbled, but mostly with people who I've met from GURPS and Savage Worlds into stuff like Fiasco or Dread or Dogs in the Vineyard or stuff like that. So I can't say I get a super authentic experience, because most of the times, like, I made the argument a bunch of times on the Savage Cast that Savage Worlds players are kind of cooler, chiller people, because the system doesn't reward Munchkin behavior. So you can play Munchkin mechanics with better players and not get the shit end of the stick.
Right, the douche factor. That's a different discussion. And Jamie, do you have experience with, I know you did Dungeon World, because I listened to that podcast with you guys.
Yeah.
So,
Savage Worlds, of course, a lot of D&D. Really dig the Fantasy Flight stuff, what they did with Star Wars and Warhammer.
Right.
That's the bulk of what I've mostly done, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So that gives us a good perspective, right? Even though we're older dudes and we've all come from that long line of the Scotts in the movie Scott, we still have some experience outside of that 2010 perspective. So that's the thing, right? So probably the easiest way to do this is talk about the character Scott, and just to kind of get him out of the way, right? I don't know if he's a protagonist or he's an anti-hero. He is the iconic 1979 to mid-90s basement elf stereotype, right?
The stereotype, 100%.
Right, he's a big dude. He's unkempt.
It's kind of one of the failings of the movie, I'd say. I mean, I enjoyed the film from an entertainment perspective, but the guy doesn't really have very many redeeming qualities. Let's see, he's overweight, he's a neckbeard, he's a man-child, he doesn't have a job, he's overbearing, he's a control freak, he has like an underling, the poor little like Wayne guy who's like, basically he tries to sabotage Wayne because it's at one point in the film he's like, I need someone to be more of a loser than I am, so that's why I like crap on you all the time.
That's a great revelation.
Yeah, he's a cheater GM. Not only does he use fiat, like he rolls dice and then lies about it. Yes. He craps on MMOs. He's kind of he can't be a protagonist because I don't think he's likable or relatable. So he's definitely the star.
My opinion on Scott and what really separates this movie from a movie like The Gamers, so to say, is The Gamers is more of like a fun twist on the hobby, whereas this movie actually has a lot of layers.
Yes.
On an emotional, psychological level, and Scott being the basis of all of that.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like it was an origin story for that guy we all know and hope we are not.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
very much
Zero
so.
Charisma 2, where Scott's Revenge.
And that's the thing, right? And Anthony had said that on in the postings and stuff. As Anthony, you had said that Scott is the sort, I guess, what was it? The caricature of that boogeyman player GM, right? That was already on its way out, well into when the movie was made.
Right. But how do we get that guy?
Yeah.
Why does everybody have stories about that guy?
Right, yeah, and that's the thing is, so I've played with dudes like Scott. I don't know if the three of you have or not. Yeah, no. Have you guys ever played with anyone like that?
No.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Pathfinder GM a couple years back, totally.
Going thing, right? There's still those dudes. I mean, yeah, just a few years ago, at a local game store, I had a guy who was a fucking katana under his trench coat. It would not have surprised me at all, right? It's just that's the kind of person that rolled in there. And I didn't expect to see that in like 2013.
Well, I think the thing with Scott is like most real people, I don't think would ever be able to check off all of that guy's faults. I mean, he's got every single one of them, right? I mean, all of them.
Storytelling efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of the only thing he's good at is he gets involved in the storytelling, right? I mean, the few times we see him gaming, at least he's trying to make a good faith effort to be entertaining or talk in character. But other than that, which I think maybe even in the movie is a bad thing, like he's taking gaming too seriously, is kind of I think what the producers are kind of getting at. But other than that, I mean, he checks off all the boxes. I don't know if you could find anyone in real life who would really check off every single one of those boxes, though.
So I want to say someone. I should have found this. There was a YouTube video, some cats playing AD&D First Edition, and it was on one of the original YouTube Brigade folks, and it was the most god-awful shit I've ever seen in my life. And those four dudes, they all checked off the fucking boxes that Scott did. If I find that, I will put this in the damn video when this goes up so people can revel in the glory of monotony. But that's not fair, right? Though you said it, Scott isn't really a monotonous GM. That's his thing, right? Like, gaming is his only saving grace for his life. His life sucks, and by his own admittance, he's a loser.
And
but I think that's also where
it's more important that 3-year campaign becomes, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
3-year epic campaign, and you can even see him sneaking in an extension quest. They finally completed the quest, and it's like, before I give you the Stones of Light, we're going to have another 3 years.
Right?
If that's okay with you.
Yeah. Right, absolutely, and it's and like I said, the movie has these paces, and when Anthony and I were talking about it, is the movie sort of, to me, it moves in these it's bookended on slogans, right? So like the first slogan you see is his bumper sticker in the beginning, right? It says, "Because I'm the game master," right? And then the movie continues to move on that. It just seems to bookend all of this asinine activity going on. Until you get to that culmination where you're like, holy shit, this guy's come full circle and has learned nothing.
The first game at Miles' house with I can do whatever I want, right?
Right, yeah, and it's weird because, yeah, like Chris, I mean, yeah, dude, Scott is condescending to his players, right? He has this, like, he just, it's like this, the scale of autism, I guess. You know, when the guy is divorced, the guy gets a text message, one of his players gets a text message, and his wife is like, I'm fucking leaving you. And for a split second, you're like, oh, Scott's going to he puts his hand on his guy's shoulder, and he's like, oh, you know, he looks like he's got some empathy, but it's not really a lot of empathy.
Well, don't forget, he did look at his watch before that.
He did, right? Check
How much time is this going to take?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, he did check that time. And like, go ahead.
It's one of the things I like about the film is in the sense that I think, like, since we are gamers who've grown up with gaming, I mean, it sounds like we all started gaming when we were actually living in our parents' houses, or as kids. It was interesting having that guy there, that one little character who's going through the divorce, and like he was like, "This is just a game I got to check out." Because that's not something that's going to happen when you're 12, right? You're not going to have, Jimmy in middle school is getting a divorce, has to dump the game, has to take care of the kids, and get his relationship back together. So that was kind of a cool thing they had in the film, is that, like, gaming at different stages of life. And Scott kind of hasn't changed stages of life. He's still, at least in the very, very beginning. If there is any character development in that character, it's in the final, like, 2 minutes of the film.
Absolutely.
Where you find that was kind of it. And it would have been cooler if there was a little bit more than that, but at least they ended with something that was a little bit of advancement. The old guy who's trying to get the old lady in the retirement home's like, Scott's like, I'm not going to let you do anything. Fine, you have to roll a 20. And I was kind of going back to the very beginning of the film when he's putting his GM fiat out there and telling his player, you're going to ruin my campaign. You can't do this. And then again, when Miles is like, look, I'm going to throw my dagger at the guy's face. We're going to end this campaign right here.
Right.
And he's like, you have to roll a 20. That's kind of like the GM thing of like, I'll take those odds. And then at the very end, the old guy is he's GMing for his grandma's nursing home, and he's got a table full of silver hairs. And one of the guys is like, I want to try to enchant or seduce Lady Loxley, the elf, and he's like, yeah, she just burned your village down, so I don't think you're going to want to do that. And he's like, nah, I want to do that. She's like, fine, and then 2-3 seconds later, he's like, okay, fine, a 19 or a 20. And that's kind of the only character development we get out of poor Scott is,
yeah,
he doubles his growth.
And that's a huge change, right? Because in the beginning, Wayne, which is his BFF whipping boy, like, he tried to do a little bit of improv, right? And Scott just shot that shit right down immediately. No improv, no joking. The fucking game is... and Scott even says the words, right? Which is some of my favorite words, because I love hearing other gamer podcasts talk about this. I need immersion, right? It's immersion in the game. You're ruining the shit. You're ruining everything by not being immersed. You're having fun.
Character.
Right, yeah, immersed in character. You're having the wrong kind of fun at his table. And his players aren't exactly, that's the weird thing. The players don't suck.
Right.
Like, the two dudes who make the YouTube videos are actually pretty creative cats. They make the zombie apocalypse video. And are those the two guys you were talking about, Anthony, when you said they sort of make one gamer?
Yeah, the two of them together make one gamer, I felt. And through the movie, I was wondering, I understood why Wayne was still playing with Scott, but I couldn't understand why those two guys were there unless it was just habit for them, or they were trying to be like Miles. They were trying to be the cool gamers at the table.
Right. And I know people, for those who haven't seen the movie, you hear this name Miles, and we're definitely going to get to Miles, because Miles presents the conundrum of the movie for, I think, a lot of people, where there's a dividing line in your heart. Also not a protagonist, I dare say, early on.
He's certainly not the enemy. Like, when they were talking on the Reddit thread or in the Nerdist podcast, they talked about Miles was supposed to be more of an antagonist, an enemy in the film, and I'm like, but wait a minute, the guy, they actually give him all the good qualities, and even
right.
And I guess the big blow up at the end when they crash, Scott comes and crashes his hipster party, was supposed to be the big reveal, like, oh, he's not really one of us anyways. Even that, I'm kind of like, I don't feel so bad for the guy, and I hate hipsters. So, it's like, even though Scott's like a member of the tribe, and Miles is totally one of these, new age kind of, I only do it after it was cool kind of guys.
Right.
In the film, I almost get the sense that the filmmakers knew about gaming. It wasn't like gamer exploitation, because they knew gaming. I mean, there was enough detail, there was enough authenticity where I didn't think it was a drive-by hit piece. But yeah, I don't know if gaming comes off good. I don't know if gamers, the hardcore gamers, not the hipster gamers, come off good in the film. And not that they need to, but hearing from people, oh, this represents our community. I don't know if it does. I kind of, Jared's not here to be a downer on the film, so maybe I'll take that role. But yeah, they make Miles the nice guy.
But
right.
Well, that brings me to a question. Do we have no sympathy for Scott's group when they show us insight into kind of why they are that way, the origin of these guys?
Yeah.
Are we sitting there thinking, yeah, but you're still a loser, or are we thinking like, man, that sucks. I can understand why he's that guy.
That's a good point. I mean, they let us know why Scott is the way Scott is. They show us his mom and his grandma and how they treat him, and so we get some sympathy there, for sure.
Right. And then I know, like, when you have the that moment at Miles's party, when all hell breaks loose, there is that moment when you're watching, even having seen it more than once, where I'm like, you motherfucker, Scott was right the whole time. Mm-hmm. Right? You are a fucking hipster fucking tourist.
Yeah.
But that's it. So talking about Miles, so there's a character that gets introduced. It's a hipster, let's be honest, right? He is a hipster. He's got the problem glasses. He's just cool enough to know he runs the fucking website named Geek Chic, which is definitely a hipster. Right, because a nerd would have named that shit like, after the fucking Starship Enterprise or some, obscure nebula, right?
Right.
And that's just the difference of nerds and hipsters of how they do things. But Miles wants to play D&D again. Well, he wants to play a game. Again, because he used to do it when he was a kid, but now that it's that Geek Chic, right? And it was interesting, and I thought that's kind of where... the writer, so one writer, Alex, is a gamer, and the other writer, Karen, she is not a gamer. So Alex was the Scott crowd, Karen represented the hipster crowd. That was on the AMA. But when Scott and Miles are talking, because Scott, sees that as an opportunity to bring in a new player from his divorced player, Miles says, which I don't know, I could be sensitive to it, but it's sort of that Miles becomes the avatar of the Forge. And if you don't remember the Forge, those are the folks who fucking put forth the gamist narrative simulationist theory that was eventually shot to shit by one of the guys who actually came up with it a few years later, right? They just said, fuck it, that's not really, it's too myopic. But Miles tells him, I really don't like, he asks if it's D&D, Scott says it's not D&D, I came up with this myself, and Miles tells him, hey, good, because I don't like the published things, I like more of the homebrew shit, which seems... That's a weird comment for someone who's not really ever been in the hobby, except when they were a kid, right?
But it's a very hipster thing. I mean, absolutely. It comes from that, I want to use a 1920s razor on my newsman's beard, and I'm not going to drink, published beers. I want to, I want to microbrew, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the difference that you see is, and again, one of those sparking moments is that Miles he embraces this kind of shit, right? Where Scott is very much ashamed of what he does. You can see it when his grandmother chides him and his mom chides him for being a fucking dork and pretending to be elves and shit. What's the line? His grandmother says, "No, what's
disturbing?
Disturbing.
Around being elves and fairies and shit."
Yeah. Right.
The nerd herd. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fucking nerd herd with you.
And it's his one thing. It's the one thing he has control over. It's the one thing he thinks he's good at. The one group of people that doesn't give him grief.
Right.
But that's disturbing. Thanks, Grandma.
Right, yeah. And you can see it in his face where he's right. And even the guys on the table, sort of, they have that moment where their heart sinks a little bit. And it's just, they've been publicly shamed. Right. Which, again, is part of this, where this film really hits you hard because, growing up, if you played this shit, you were publicly shamed, right? There was a point where as a kid, it would be, even when we're talking in our era, right, so 80s and 90s, it would have been easier to come out as being a homosexual than to tell your fucking classmates you play Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, that's especially like where I grew up. It was just like no chance in hell. The ass whoopings would have been incredible from a variety of people. But yeah. Oh man. So we got Miles. Miles enters it. Miles is definitely a hipster, and I know some people might get angry when they see this. We're not really attacking hipsters. We're just it's putting it out there. If you're a hipster, it is what it is. Play D&D in your skinny jeans. We don't give a shit.
Yeah, my problem with Miles is he's kind of the Mary Sue of the movie. Like, he's thin, he's handsome, he's a CEO,
right?
So he's also basically right. So he has a job, but it's not even like a plugger worker job. It's one of those, I graduated from college and immediately got a 10-figure job and I can buy whatever I want kind of shit jobs. He's funny. I mean, that's the thing is, like, I identify with Miles in the sense when he was at the table playing and using humor, I enjoy that at the table. I'm not an immersive kind of guy for most games. I mean, like horror, you're a dick if you're trying to do horror because it's hard to for a GM to control a horror game. But if you're doing pulp or something fun, I love meta humor. So I enjoyed being the Miles character. So that and the other players like him. I mean, there's never kind of a point where the other players at the table are like, "Oh God, this Miles guy is awful. He's ruining our campaign." And
brings life back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is they're finally getting to see a way that they probably wanted to have played the whole time.
Yeah.
But because it's an established group, at least by the way the movie presents it, it's an established group where, like you said, Scott is in control. Yeah. It's his way or the highway. And now, the new guy he's a little bit too, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I don't know him that well, so I'm not going to tell him to shut the fuck up, basically.
Right.
And so everyone else has a sense of, oh, wow, well, I'm going to follow his lead because this is the way I've wanted to do it for so long, but Scott wouldn't let me.
Right. And the initial moment of Miles getting in the group is awkward, right? Because Scott opens the door, and they do the awkward white guy, like, handshake, fist bump, high five, and Miles is like, fuck it, give me a hug, right? Which is...
He's probably not been hugged.
Right? Yeah. And then when Miles brings the beer out, that look around the table is very telling. And even I was like that probably a decade ago, where if you had been like, well, we're going to sit and drink alcohol, it would have been like, we're not going to sit, this is serious shit. Because I used to be the Scott, just it was cleverly disguised behind, like, the Miles, where I was like, we're at the table, this is some serious shit, you better immerse yourself, and no one's drinking because we're not going to get drunk and shit-hammered and play tiddly fuck with each other.
Well, it's also kind of an age marker. Like, I know, I mean, this is a truth for me in gaming, is like, I started gaming in middle school long before, girls and sex and all that kind of stuff. So for me, that's never been part of my games, even as an adult. Like, I don't need to recreate, having a date with fairy chicks or whatever. So when I see people talking about they're having these role games with their adult games, my adult games are still violence and conquest, not I need to work out sexual stuff in a game. Where the beer is, to me, kind of sucks. I look at that as like a symbol of that. Like, when you're an 11-year-old, you're only drinking Mountain Dew and having chips because that's the only thing your parents are going to buy for you. And then the guy brings it, like, you can see the whole table's like, can we have one? And the guy's like, sure, take a beer. And then Scott's giving everybody the stink eye.
Yeah.
And to me, it was kind of like, Miles was bringing, like, let's adult game here. Let's take it beyond what you did when you were in middle school. Now we can have beers and be cool with it. And
yeah, and that's where it is. Like, so now, when we sit around and play a game, we totally drink. It's not to that point of being a retard, but we do it. So Jamie, this is one for you. So Miles comes in, right? We said Miles is that hipster. So, and I think we talked about it a little bit, where Miles does inject that little bit of modernism, right? That I think every table really needs.
He's like as perfect an example as Scott is, like you were saying before.
Yeah, and I think Miles might be allegory for some of what was going on in that time frame, but we did say that Miles is perceived as being a tourist, right? But Jamie, what debate does Miles settle within fucking minutes of sitting down at that game table? the great nerd debate about the.
The Millennium
Yep.
Falcon.
Yep.
Yeah. I look at that though as like the guy walks in is like, because you guys talk about he's a tourist and this and that and everything else, but he's got, like Chris is saying, the Mary Sue syndrome, where he has everything about him, he knows everything, he's good at everything, but he kind of sits down and sets the gauntlet down and says, no, I know my shit.
Right.
That was the zipper coming down. I mean, that was the I've got the biggest package at the table, because it wasn't just a hipster thing; it was a geek thing. It wasn't like he went to the math. He's like, on a small size galaxy.
Hold on, Chris. Time out. We lost you.
Exactly. So he went full geek. He wasn't just nerd or cool.
He's not coming through on my end.
No, we lost Chris's audio. I'm gonna type him out to real fast. So, and that's the thing, right? Is he just dropped.
I started a group here in Seoul a few years ago around the time of this, 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And so I used like Meetup.com to meet strangers, which was awkward enough. But one of the fellows that showed up, kind of took a look at me, realized I've been playing since the 80s, and he was expecting me to bring, like the Holmes box set out and say, this is the way that you really play. And I asked him, well, what have you played? And he said, well, the first and best game that I've ever played was Dogs in the Vineyard. So whatever it is that we're doing, we were going to play a Ubiquity game.
Oh, so, nice.
It had to be as good as that.
And that's a tough bar, right, when people set that shit high. And so, Chris, we lost you on the debate between the which is faster, Millennium Falcon or the Enterprise, right? So, you said Miles solved that by doing what?
Yeah, he went full geek and got the science out. He talked about the distance between the outer rim of a galaxy and the center, and so it wasn't just like a hipster tourist bit. It was, kind of part of the overarching narrative, I think, of how geekdom has evolved. It started out with like, in media, the nerds were the people who were smart and physics, math inclined, and now we've kind of gotten to the part where it's
right.
You don't have to be mathematically, you don't have to be Asian. You can be a stupid math person, but if you enjoy your hobbies and aren't embarrassed about it, you can be a geek or a nerd, or But Miles went full geek. He went full. They were getting the calculator out to like double check his math. So
right, yeah.
That's kind of Miles is the perfect guy. He got the math right too. So
yeah, absolutely. And it was surprising, right? And that was that moment where you're like, oh shit. You kind of feel. I felt bad inside. I was like, God damn it, I just misjudged this dude, and is he not the world's biggest douchebag? And then in the game,
that whole scene was one of the great lines in the movie, though.
Yes, I was just going to mention that. Go ahead.
He said, "I don't like to deal in what was it? I like to deal in reality." So,
right. Right. Basically, Scott didn't want to hear the debate anymore because they've been having it for years, and then when Miles shows up and was like, "No, it's fucking easy," and no one at this table is the dick measuring contest when Miles is like, no, but Miles wasn't a dick about it, right? He was very helpful, very positive. I mean, Miles is an incredibly positive force at the table. And then Scott sort of gets him back too while during the game when they're having that conversation, they're role playing, and Scott calls Miles' character because Miles says, "Oh, I was raised in this area, and I would know this and that about the environment," and the NPC tells Miles, but you're an outsider to our people, and I mean, it's just this fucking dialogue here.
Yeah, he came right out and told him, "You're nothing more than a tourist here."
Right? Yeah, that's what he said. That's what he called him, a fucking tourist.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh. God, and then Scott, that dude, and the movie has these weird beats, right? Well, because there's like, Scott is such a douche, and you just this descend, and then sometimes you go up, like when you find out his mom abandoned him and he doesn't have a dad, you're like, oh, I can kind of get this, and you're like, well, his grandmother took him in, and she's trying to help him and trying to motivate him, but she isn't asked to him. But I thought because she's a smart ass, right? But
well, and that's kind of like the grandma's like codependent, like where she has to crap on him to keep him around, so when she gets older, he's there for her to depend on. Like that was kind of, I don't know, that rang true to me as far as like psychoanalysis of codependency and people who they control other people. And Scott passes it on to Wayne, right? I mean, Wayne is the guy who's that's the cycle of violence, whatever they call it.
Yes, because then that scene, there is a scene, right, that I think you're alluding to that comes into play, where Wayne he's on, I don't know, like Tinder or whatever, right, of whatever 2013's dating website was, and Scott tells him, don't worry about this chick, don't bother with it, because she's gonna be a loser, and she's gonna see you, and you're not what she expects, and he really just shits on his whole wanting to date, and then there's the rape scene. Right, that follows that. I mean, it is what it is, right? It's a rape scene. It's every bit a rape scene.
Yeah, but
it's not what everyone thinks it is.
Right. It's a funny analogy version.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And because Wayne has the big zit, and Scott wants to pop it, and Wayne is like, "You're not popping it," and then Scott holds him down in his bed and jumps on him and straddling him, right? And they're rolling around, and it just. Yes, it's very sexual in nature of how it plays out.
And he cleaned up with the tissue.
Right, he cleans up with the tissue. He's sitting there. Wayne rolls over, and Scott's like, "Well, you can sleep here tonight if you want." Right.
And he does.
Right. Yeah. And it's just like, what the fuck? That was a weird fucking scene in that movie. I don't know.
I couldn't help but through the whole movie, I mean, realistically, through the whole movie, but just feel bad for Scott. It's easy to sit back and go, man, what a prick. The guy's a fucking control freak and this and that and everything else. And that's one of the aspects of the film I did like, is because they did bring in his mom. Yeah. And it gives you that understanding, of the bullshit the guy went through to make him who he is today. Yeah. And even at the end of the movie, you're like, oh, okay, he's moved on. He's in a better place now. He's got a job. He's working. Living at home.
Yeah, right. He's living in a fucking nursing home.
Yeah, he's living in the old age home. Yeah,
it's odd, and then like I said, Scott's a weird one. You root for him, you don't root for him. There's not a good character in the entire movie, which is weird to say. It's this deep introspection of like, God, Miles seems cool, and he turns out to be a cunt, right? And then Scott is like, God damn, this guy is like the living embodiment of everything shitty about Gygax everyone ever wrote, about that behavior at the table and shit. But then, yeah, I mean, Jamie, you're right. Then you see how his life turns out, and you're like, fuck, I feel a little bad for him.
Well, and my problem is like if you're gonna make Miles the bad guy, the only really bad thing he does is he has a party for his hipster friends and doesn't invite the gaming group.
Right.
And then when Scott shows up to crash the party, he calls Wayne, Wayne, can you come over and like take care of this for me? Yep. He's a dick move. And then they have their fight, and the biggest bad thing he says is like, get out of my house, you effing nerds, or you goddamn nerds.
Yeah.
And he obviously by saying that, he identifies that he's not really part of their group. He's not part of the tribe. He's hanging along for the the ride, but that's not that bad. I mean, considering Scott, who is manipulating Wayne and he's whatever. I mean, there's other, and see, Scott does it too. Remember when they're in the Donut Taco Palace too, and they're interviewing new gamers to take over for the guy who's got a real life and wants to go do it, and they get the kid there who's going to be a great player, but he's like, I play MMOs, and Scott's like, he throws the paper in the guy's face and like, get out of here, no MMO players.
Right. And
it's kind of like that. Oh God, what's the hierarchy of nerddom where there's like, the furries who do Star Trek, shipping romance between Spock and Kirk are the bottom, and then everybody else is above that. But it's kind of like that where Scott craps downstream on the MMO players, and then the hipsters crap downstream on the traditional game master types. So.
But the thing is about that whole scene when it finally all seemed to come to fruition, where Miles does tell him, "Get out of my house, you fucking nerds,"
yep.
is unless I missed something, that is the part of the movie that really made me go, okay, so what was Miles' motive throughout this whole thing?
Right.
I mean,
I think they didn't have that. To me, it would be a better script if Miles published an expose on his website. You know, my 6 weeks slumming it with the nerds.
Yeah.
right.
They didn't have that. They didn't have the actual exploitation, so we don't know. I mean,
How to lose a nerd in 10 days.
Right. Yeah.
They could have gone there, and to me, like they did. I think it's a lost storytelling. Because if you want to make Miles the bad guy, that could have done it. But I mean, all things considered, if someone comes into my house and starts beating me up with a crutch, oh God, you called him a nerd. Okay. I mean, I hated that the movie kind of makes you like Miles, and I mean, not to hijack the conversation, but to me, the big beyond the whole like new age gaming, narrative gaming, whatever. The thing that to me is that the big shift in tone, and maybe this is more the last year or two, because it's finally come to tabletop, is the hipsters have brought with them the, I don't know, there's not really a better term for it, like the cultural Marxists.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about feminism, we're going to talk about, the patriarchy and all this shit gets dumped onto tabletop.
Right.
And to me, that's also coming with the tide of, bringing in new people to the hobby, having more diverse styles of gaming. And there are two sides to the coin. I enjoy kind of some of the new style gaming. I don't enjoy I'm going to take everything I learned in freshman feminine studies class and dump it on your hobby, and you're going to have to, change for me stuff.
Right.
So there wasn't any of that with Miles. I mean, there's none of the, I don't know, more controversial / toxic elements. And same thing with Scott, is they don't have any of the good stuff with Scott until the end.
Right.
And I mean, even when you have these neckbeard guys, there is value in people who put their time in to create gaming, create stories, do that. To me, they don't show any of that. You don't see why Scott can be a good guy.
Right.
It's kind of implied. I mean, again, like maybe he was the good guy back when they were in middle school, and now he's just still the same person, and everyone else has grown up. But I think that was a shortcoming. Something I would have liked to have had covered is that, the hipster invasion isn't all sweetness and light and let's get along and make gaming better. There's also some toxic crap too.
Well, that's the biggest thing they did with each one of those characters is they gave each one of them a benchmark.
Yeah.
And they wanted to hold it to that. They didn't want to go too diverse with each character to actually show the different sides of the gaming. So in that aspect, I thought they did a really good job. But so going back to something like with what I was saying about, you kind of wonder what Miles' whole goal was. There's one side of me that says, yes, I would love to know what that truly was, but that was also something I thought that they did that was really good with this movie, is they did leave some things up to the viewer's imagination. Just like the whole thing with the video the two guys did. Yeah. Did it really suck, or did people actually like it?
Right, yeah. It's never answered, is it?
And, in the end, did Scott and Wayne become friends again? Who knows?
Right.
What was Miles' real goal? We don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because Scott leaves his whole gaming group. Ostensibly they're another state away because he has to move to Arizona. So we know that's definitely a long distance relationship with his friends. But yeah, I mean, none of those questions are answered.
And that's what I like about it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a very good movie. I hope people should stop avoiding it because it really is an interesting look, especially that snapshot in time. And Chris is right. Like there is that, it's inevitable especially when when the Forge started, they really. I mean, there's a lot of the more hipster, like you can be a role player and still be cool, and like I'm probably the biggest hypocrite because I was thinking about this shit as I'm riding down the road on my fucking chopper, on my way to work, and just like, and I'm not, one percenter. I'm just this fucking normal dude who happens to be this super geeky shit, but you'd never tell, right, unless I talked to you about it.
Right.
And yeah, they started pushing that narrative, and this film came out right at that high point of, I mean, if you remember the big arguments on the internet at that point was, fuck D&D, it's, myopic and too limiting and old school is fucking lame, you got to play Dungeon World because no one should ever fail, and yeah, I do think that Miles' character is that allegory I don't think that can be helped, given that it's an indie film made by 2 indie writers and done by an indie director.
And that's funny because you say that, because that is one aspect of the gamer that they really didn't touch on in that whole movie, is the regular average Joe.
Right? Yeah.
No, you're saying a dude like you, or Chris. I'm not too familiar of you outside of what you're doing on podcasting and stuff like that, but like a dude like me, unless someone sat down and just actually said, "Oh, by the way, it happened to game," then all of a sudden I'm going, speak out. Other than that, I'm just like regular cat. Did you watch the races last weekend? That kind of guy.
Right.
They didn't touch on that aspect of gamers whatsoever, which is actually a pretty big crowd, at least with the conventions and stuff I've gone to, because I've gone to conventions before where I'm like, I felt like Scott walking into the hipster party. The look he just gave, like, what the fuck did I just walk into?
Yeah, right.
These kind of conventions where I'm just like, which one of these kids is different? It's me.
Yeah.
But other conventions I go to, it's regular cats. We just sit around drinking some beers, talking some shit, playing some games. I mean, you have your Scotts there, you have your stereotypes there. I think that's unavoidable, but they didn't touch on the regular Joe, and I don't know, that part of it was kind of like, I felt like they could have made one of the other players at the table that regular guy.
Right, and the 2 dudes who do the film, they kind of strike me as those normal dudes, right? Because they kind of want a game, but they'll drink the beer, and they make cool movies, and they're just on that cusp of being normal human beings. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Again, we got to keep pimping this film out. I don't know the writers or directors, but it really is a neat film if you want to have a good look at what it means to be a gamer. And at one point at the party, like it almost seems like Miles hasn't actually embraced this. It's hard to Scott comes in. I know he doesn't want Scott there, but it's not because Scott wasn't invited. I think it almost seems like it's what Scott represents, right? And because the rest of the party is all fucking San Franciscoites, right? Tattoos and fucking goatees and craft beers, and Scott comes in, but they're all welcoming to him, right? Which is sort of also what that crowd brings.
To me, there's a guy in the film called Kevin, and he's the one who's tattoo right under his collar. Yes. It's not a gangster tattoo; it's a hipster tattoo, right? Yeah. And the same people who would bitch about cultural appropriation, but it's totally a Japanese tattoo,
Right, yeah.
But that guy was a douche. I mean, that guy is the one who's, he and his friend are filming Scott.
Yeah.
And you know that film is there to go up on YouTube or Vine or whatever the hipster video sharing is, as the look at this douchebag doing this shit. So to me, that Kevin character was the guy who they don't take Miles there, but Kevin goes there. Kevin's the douchebag.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember that guy. Yeah, and Miles does seem like after it all fell apart, right? I mean, he was pissed, but I think he was playing along with Scott because when the fight starts, it's not really a fight. It's just sort of everyone encouraging this like LARPing, if you will, where they're going to have this sword fight with crutches, and Scott demonstrates here's how you parry, your 4 zones of a parry, and then that's to do it. But then Scott's just anger and hatred, at Miles is really coming out, and then he starts really hitting hard, and Miles even tells him, he's like, hey man, you're hitting too fucking hard, and then Scott he's not even hearing that, and that's when Miles has to defend himself.
Well, the thing is with that scene is Scott got pissed off where he was once again one-upped.
Yes,
he could go into a situation, once again being in control, where he had a bigger dick than Miles in that situation, and when it turns out once again Miles gets closer to the middle of the table, Scott gets pissed off,
Right, yeah. It's like he never takes into account that there are those people who are just going to be naturally good at shit.
Right.
They're just going to pick things up. And, it could be the Mary Sue syndrome, right? Very easily so.
To me, like, that was the beginning of that scene was actually part of, I thought, an interesting switch in the roles where Scott actually, for having 0 charisma, Scott comes in and has the charisma in that scene because everybody's listening to him, and he's doing his little public speaking spiel, and he's running that fight. I mean, it's not, and it's almost as if Miles is going along with it, so Miles doesn't lose face, with his friends, and Miles doesn't know when to stop it or how to stop it. So until it goes bad, until Scott, misses and trips over the couch, and Miles gets the laugh out of it. Scott was actually, he was in Miles' castle killing his dudes kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Hipsters were
They
trying to
even said that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And they're filming, like I said, they're filming it the whole time. They're filming the duel, and they have the phone vertical, which really just drove me fucking insane. I was like, dude, turn your fucking phone sideways. Jesus Christ. Yeah, and it's just there's some of the lines that they deliver back from Scott tells everyone, I'm the game master, I'm the game, and it's everything is preordained with Scott. When you're playing with the miniatures, that's very clear because the story's already written because he's playing out the next adventure with those miniatures. Says, you're gonna fight the Goblin Queen, and here's the dude you're gonna meet. And then Miles tells him, it's not supposed to be work, it's supposed to be fun, right? Which is a great mantra for this. And yeah, like I said, this may be just an allegory for that changing of the guard, where it's just like you can do cool shit and you can have fun being a geek chic, if you will, right? You can know shit. You can be hyper nerd and drill into something weird, like how fast the Millennium Falcon really is versus the Enterprise, without not showering for days and living in your basement or your parents' house, and just all those stereotypes that Scott represents.
But I hope that the movie doesn't get the point across to a lot of people of, hey, if you're going to be a gamer, be a hipster, because then I fucking quit.
Look at you, man. Yeah, I don't know if it does that, right? I think my hope is that it sort of injects, like I said, that little bit of reality for like, look, there's other games out there, and you can experiment, and you can have a good time, and you don't need to be super serial and sit behind a GM screen and obfuscate roles. I'm just saying, Jamie. I kind of have an idea why you like this movie so much after I saw that scene again.
I love Scott.
I was like, oh, Jamie's got a fucking hero. But yeah, it's really sad because Jamie, goddamn, you got me thinking about you're 14 versus 4 on that roll when he made it. Because he gets busted by the dude's girlfriend, Kendra, right, when he meets Miles' girlfriend. And that was even a shock in him when she opened that door and he was just like, there's a fucking girl here. That's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah. And that scene, again, dove even further into Scott's character.
Right, yeah.
Trying to read his palm or whatever. I mean, he's in the moment. He's like, yeah,
Right.
yeah. It just dives so much into, unfortunately, a stereotype that is once again really played up about gamers, as none of us know what a booby feels like.
Bags of sand, just ask Maddox.
And that's the one side of it that I could see is just kind of like a unfortunate, discouraging message. But unfortunately, the flip side to that is, in some cases, a very real message.
Right, yeah. I mean, it can, but yeah, and there's a lot of folks who game that are married or whatever.
I wouldn't be surprised if, and this is me doing a little psychoanalysis on the directors, if the guy the Matthews, who's the gamer part of the duo, if he wasn't more of a gamer, or he's channeling gaming from his middle school experience. I mean, we'll assume he's like a late 20s, middle 30s kind of guy, somewhere in there, making his first film. That, it's almost as if he's channeling 1980s, 1990s gamers, but early 2000s hipsters. So, I mean, Scott as a character, I think that the people we know like Scott are probably from our memory, if not, they'd be more tragic and sad and bad people, frankly, if they were in their 30s and 40s, not moving on with life, not, so I wonder about that. I think there is a lot of that in the kind of gaming journalism where the people who are getting their first writing jobs out of college working for a website are talking about the gamers they remember from high school, 10 years before, 15 years before, and not the current actual state of gaming. It's like what both you guys said, and I'm big on the convention scene as well. There's a pretty big slice of humanity that shows up for gaming conventions, and it's not the, the way people behaved when we were all in middle school was forgivable for being in middle school. it's socially toxic or awkward or suicide. Do that now as like a 30-year-old man. But to me, like the current state, even without the modern games and that kind of stuff, go back to like 2010 when this movie was probably being conceptualized and made. I think gaming had already progressed beyond the Scots. I don't think, as a piece of archaeology, I don't think gaming was still where Scott was. Whereas I think the hipster part was kind of where the hipster part was. I mean, and that's kind of a newer movement, whatever. So, so I don't know that like I think the reality is more complex. I think gaming has actually evolved much beyond Scott. There are the negative sides to the larger audience coming into the hobby they aren't as nostalgic for because they didn't play it 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So there's not that bias. So they can bring their college campus bias immediately to gaming, as gaming is a new thing for them. So I mean, again, it's not a documentary, so I'm not going to shit on the movie because it didn't become a documentary. But I think the Scott character is kind of a fossil already. Even for gaming. I mean, I don't think a lot of gaming happens that way anymore, even.
Right. No. Yeah. No, and I've like listening to Happy Jacks it's a big one that brings in those horror stories. A lot of those horror stories are very old, and I've kind of said this to other people, is I think the myth of the adversarial GM is mostly myth, right? And it's like the Bigfoot, right? Everyone saw Bigfoot at some point, or I know someone. My uncle took a picture of Bigfoot, and I think it gets perpetuated, and so you have this. It's a cultural icon that it existed, right, at some form, because you get stereotypes for a reason. But yeah, I think it's just overdone, very likely. It's just I don't know, it's a surreal movie when it comes to those two events. But yeah, you're right. I mean, go ahead, Jamie.
But they still do exist. I mean, I understand, especially nowadays. No, it's not the mid '80s, early '90s. Yeah. I get that. They put Scott in 1987. He's trying to rock on with some Def Leppard, and that's where they made him. You know what I mean? But while the scene is much more diverse now, it's unfortunate, and I hate to say it because we're just normal dudes who like to play games and things like that. I get it. Yeah. But at least out here in California, where I'm at, in the conventions I've been to, there's still so many times that I've walked through and I've been, I'm talking to my buddy and I'm like, dude, there's a lot of people here that are really not helping the stereotype.
So there you go, right? I mean, it definitely exists, especially amongst what probably the wargaming community is huge on that. And even so, third edition hit in 2000, and even then, I think the hobby was starting to shift, right? Because Wizards of the Coast put a lot of effort to getting the word out. Now, it wasn't just Dragon Magazine or Dungeon Magazine. That shit was everywhere. You could hear people talking about it. I was actually out in Northern California when it launched, and yeah, it was being pushed pretty big, which is good on them. They want to make money and they want to keep the hobby alive, which is great. I mean, everyone agrees you need more people in the hobby. But yeah, that shift from the dying of the 80s, mid 90s gamer. Yeah, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know how much of Scott was he's a weird character. He really is. And then Miles is also just so confounding when you watch these two.
I mean, I think some of those guys still exist as far as like they were those people back in the 80s. But I don't know too many of them that are still. I mean, again, there's still people who don't care about following fashion trends, so they're still going to be wearing their awful shirts and they're probably too small, and so they're showing some gut and some butt. That kind of shit. That's fine, whatever. Yeah. I don't think those. I mean, those people have jobs now. They have kids now. They have careers. So. To me, pigeonholing them in that same kind of vein of you were the guy that's all your entire life was gaming, or it was the only interesting thing you did in your parents' basement. Again, I think those people I think they've moved on and become actual more adult or more people too. Let alone like inviting other people into the hobby that aren't necessarily so socially awkward or races or whatever you want to call it, but
it's just. Yeah, no, yeah, and it's true. It's just that the hobby has changed so much from 2013. There's just so much going on. Yeah, and I think Scott gets that wake-up call, right, that times have changed. Yeah, because we've said he's sort of stuck in that mid-'80s, and there's always that saying, never meet your heroes, right? Mm-hmm. And when, it's not Gary Gygax. What was the dude's name?
Greg Gorn.
Yeah, Greg Gorn, the inventor of the game that Scott grew up playing. Dungeons & Dragons really is what it was. It was definitely Gary Gygax. Scott's asking, he's being very adversarial and kind of a dick to the dude, right? And the guy's just there. He really doesn't want to be there. He doesn't give a fuck. He's in a room full of hyper nerds, and he's just like, I can't believe I'm probably being paid for this, but I'm answering these fucking retarded questions like, when did they change the movement rate? From when he's just like, fuck, if you read the rules, you'd understand this. But then Scott asks all these questions, and his last words to Scott are, it's a game, have fun.
Yep.
And that broke Scott, and he tiraded out of that room. He basically told everyone to go fuck their mothers and drop the mic and walked out.
That was his snapping point.
Yeah, and he realized, I think, that was a good character development where it was just like, fuck me. And that was...
It's an interesting point, too, that whole thing when he does finally snap, like you even said, 10 years ago you were that RP Nazi or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was the same way, and I had my point too, where I finally had to go, fuck it, man, it's just a game.
Right, yeah.
And that, unfortunately for Scott, didn't happen until he was in his mid-30s or whatever the case may be.
Right, yeah. And some people may not ever have those moments. And then there's the converse, where some people are way lax about the game, and it's just like, we played for 30 minutes and, someone knocked over the fucking bowl of chips and all the beer, and fuck it, we'll go, do something else now.
Yeah.
Or, like when they introduced Miles, and it was sort of that impression you get. Well, it's not when they introduced Miles, when they had the game at Miles' house, and Miles has that moment where he realizes that all this shit's ordained in the story, and Scott's gonna monologue the fuck because he wants his Mary Sue character, his NPCs to get. And Miles, like Chris said at the beginning, I throw my sword at his face. Yeah. It's like fuck him. And
can't do that. Why not? We can do what we want, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what he asked me. I thought we could do whatever we wanted to, and so Scott has to. Good on Scott, where he kind of says he admits that you can do whatever you want. But then he tells him you have to roll a 20 to do it. And of course, everyone knows what's going to happen when you challenge a fucking player. That was amazing because he did. Well, the scene unfolds and it throws Scott into a personal fucking rage about the game, and that's what he even calls his own group losers. Right? Yeah, because he walks away from the table and because they all want to have fun, and he even calls his friend losers. Yep. Yeah, it was a pretty dark moment. But yeah, and then. I don't know, after the fight, Wayne comes and picks Scott up, and he sort of babies him, right? And they're on that drive back, and that's like that hero's journey out of the underworld, finally. It's just...
Wayne even tells him we can get the group back together. He's like, once I tell him what Miles did, I think we can get the group back together.
Right.
Obviously it doesn't happen because Scott moves to Arizona, but... I think earlier in the show we asked, does Wayne ever forgive Scott? Well, I think that was kind of the moment where he does.
Yeah, true statement. And then Scott.
That's right.
Go ahead.
That's right.
Yeah.
That pretty much solidified that, but it never. What's that?
Well, Wayne even jumps on Miles. Wayne pulls Miles' hair out too.
Yeah.
That scene, the end of the fight is when Wayne goes all they're gonna pull your hair out on Miles.
He pulls Miles' carefully fucking sculpted to look unkempt fucking I don't care
$100 haircut.
Yeah. You rip it down to the scalp and this shit's bleeding. Yeah. But man. But yeah, I mean, like we said, Scott eventually he relents. His grandmother sells their house, which the mom was planning the whole time. And they moved to Arizona, and she's in the nursing home, or it's not a nursing home, it's an old folks community. And Scott's in there watching TV with her, and they're still lamenting that her daughter is useless and doesn't give a fuck about her. And Scott's sitting there watching TV, and he puts the badge on because he works there.
Yep.
And then he goes to run a game for and the old people don't even want to play the game with Scott.
So he had to physically wheel one of the ladies to a table.
Yeah, so I mean, in everything that he experienced with that, it was really weird because, like we said, there's a part of Scott that I forgot when you guys were talking who said it, but yeah, when the old guy wants to seduce the whatever the hell she was, he learned just enough to say yes but he's still so controlling, and I don't think the Miles thing really helped out because he, like I said, he realized that I was right the whole time, and no one gets me.
That's actually that's a very good point. Is I guess that was, and I guess the only way I could put it is an open-ended closure to Scott is that in the end he knew he was right.
Right, yeah. I mean, all it did was reinforce every negative fucking thing that Scott brought to the table as a game sort of person. So there's been some reviews, right? Fistful of Dice did one. His title, his review was very straightforward: is it's ruining, it's bad for our hobby. So that's the question with this movie, and while we have people watching, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of comments on both sides of the fence on this. I can't wait. To me personally, I think a movie like this is actually really healthy for this hobby to have around. I don't know. What about you guys?
I don't think, quite honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking through rose-colored lenses or something, but I just look at it as it's not helpful. It's not harmful. It's just a kickback, good time movie. And again, I'm looking at it through the eyes of a gamer where I sit back and go, oh, I can relate to that. There's not... Could it hurt the gaming community? I don't see why or how. I mean, there's parts of it that reinforce the stereotype that people that are very ignorant to it, they would look at it and go, see, that's why we don't do that shit. But in the end, I mean... people, whether they see this movie or not, if they already have that opinion, they're going to have that opinion.
Right.
I think it's healthy for a couple reasons. Like, one, it's good to have self-reflection, right? Like, no matter what, I don't think any topic should be taboo, so why not be able to talk about shitty GMs? Two, I think if you own it, you should be able to laugh about it, too. I mean, I think one of my problems of, like, the doom and the gloom and doom brigade, which I call the cultural Marxists, is that like they are the most humorless people ever. They don't laugh at anything, right? And it's just like, I think you should be able to talk about this kind of crap. I mean, I even bought a domain name. I wanted to like debate people over game stuff. So I bought a great game debating. And nice. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I mean, I want to do like this is nerding out, right? Like high school style debate where you show up with a resolution, and you go back and forth, right? And that I think it'd be interesting bringing a little structure. Because there's so much lost when it comes down to like which half of the debate. There's never even two sides, but that they get played that way. Which people have the worst trolls on your side? It's like that's not where the debate is. The debate isn't the flamers or the people who are just angry keyboard jockeys. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of good faith debate where we actually care about what other people say and care about the topic. So in that regards, like, I think we should be able to laugh at ourselves, have people who look like us or in our community be the villains or be the good guys, whatever. I don't think it hurts. I mean, I don't think it hurts, and I think it was a good movie because it was funny. I mean, they definitely they punctuated what could have been a real kind of gloom and like, for instance, if Scott killed Miles. It totally could have been one of those movies where, like, God, I can't think of the guy's name right now. Not Joseph Gordon-Levitt or whatever, but there's an actor who's been in a couple art films. They're all these just massively depressing, either they end up in suicide or death, kind of, artsy-fartsy shit films. And it could have gone there. Right? It could have been one of these things like the dark side of gaming and, what drove God to murder the hipster. Instead, it was kind of a dark comedy. And so, it ended on a light note. So I think it's a good thing. I think it helps the community to be able to get represented. I mean, again, the more people, like, think they can produce a film that your culture or your subculture's in, and they present it to the mass audience, and you can laugh at it, I think that's acceptance. That's taking a step towards the mainstream. Everyone else thinks like, the kind of like keyboard jockeys think if your subculture gets made fun of, that's the worst thing ever. It's like, no, it's kind of like welcome to the club. You know?
Yeah.
You make fun of jocks and rich people and sorority types and fraternity types. I mean, these movies like Animal House, like, it's kind of one of those films where they poke fun at a bunch of different levels of society there, and they don't just shit on everybody. So here, I mean, we were kind of getting, it's kind of a modern Animal House in the sense that we're getting a subculture that's not really readily apparent to everybody, which I think the sorority fraternity culture wasn't as open in, as in the late 70s, early 80s when Animal House came out, like 76, whatever it was. So same kind of thing. You're kind of getting a look into gaming culture, but it's being presented to a wider audience. I mean, I know Nerdist wasn't involved until it was already made. I mean, they were like the distributor, so they weren't like behind it. But they're the ones who then brought it to the art house and film festival scene.
Right.
So, I mean, in that regards, if you're getting your culture shown to, people who aren't necessarily part of it, I don't think it's a bad thing. Especially, I mean, yes, Scott's a stereotype. Yes, he's kind of a problematic character. He's definitely not a hero, but at least it was funny, and at least there's some character growth. And there was nothing that was so horrible that anyone should be offended at. I mean, everybody's offended these days, right? But at least it was funny.
But that makes me ask the question to you, though, Chris. Are you looking at that from a biased position as a gamer? I mean, what if you knew absolutely nothing of gaming except for those stereotypes that you've heard? And now you sit down and watch this movie and go, fuck, it's all true.
But at least it's funny versus... it doesn't go so far as to basically say we have to shit on these people, exclude them from their community, they're toxic, and we should, shun them. I mean, at least it's entertaining from the sense that, you might invite one of them to your party for some laughs. I don't know. I mean...
to fight with crutches?
Yeah, right.
A crutch fight. Which is kind of funny, though. If you think about it for a second, like a crutch fight, I mean, it's kind of implying this, I don't want to use the word retardation, because it's a physical versus mental, whatever, but I mean, it's definitely...
It was symbolic.
Yeah, it was a symbolic thing. It wasn't a broomstick. It wasn't a beer bottle. It was a crutch.
Right.
Which I think is at least metaphorical for Scott, that gaming is his social crutch.
Yeah.
It is the reason he's, or maybe it's the reason he's overcoming being socially awkward or whatever. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't think they crap enough on gaming to make it a negative film. I mean, I don't think it's.
It shows both sides as being assholes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you're not a gamer and you're like, okay, well, I knew D&D players were a little fucking weird, but not all weird. Like, you've got those degrees even at Scott's table. It was like, you've got Scott, like, holy fuck, that would not happening. But everyone else is like, oh, that's so bad. Miles is cool. He plays, and he's got, tattoos and crap ears and shit, but he's also kind of a dick. So you get that broad spectrum of that bell curve of, like, fuck.
Right.
I don't know. And so just for everyone knows, like, the comedy in the movie is weird. It's not overly, I don't know how to, it's not a comedy like you think it's going to be. It's not, you're going to shit yourself on your couch laughing, laugh out loud comedy. It's fucking dark. It's very dark, and there's humor to it. Like Chris said, if you can embrace it and you realize that it's healthy to laugh at yourself. There are some really dark moments, like when Scott's mom is cleaning up and she finds the Morning Star and tells him, go fuck off with this, and that fucking, all you see in the background when she's bitching at him is that Morning Star unravel. And it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could have went south, but
I think that's the biggest thing, though, is if you get it because you do it,
right?
It's got a lot more comedic value.
Yeah.
And I seriously, it makes me wonder that, though, if what it would look like through the eyes of a non-gamer.
I don't know. So my wife watched it with me the first time we saw it, and she's definitely a non-gamer. She's it's night and day. She gets it though. She's supportive, but definitely doesn't game. And she thought the movie was really, really fun. She thought it was funny. I'm trying to remember. I should have talked to her before this, but yeah, like the whole Scott thing. She gets that. She's seen that before, and just the people I've talked about. Some of the shit that's gone down before. The Miles thing, she knows about, the whole hipster thing, because a lot of our friends I would categorize as hipsters. the folks we know are probably more in that realm. But yes, I mean, she got it. She doesn't think anything negative of gaming. But then again, that could be a skewed perspective because we're married, and she knows that regardless, she's got a fucking super dark. Yeah, she got her fucking basement looks like it's a goddamn medieval tavern. So yeah, I don't know. I don't. There's not. Is there anything else you wanted to say about this? I mean, it's
kind of like what Clerks was to Gen Xers.
Yes.
I think there was enough. I mean, like the Donut Taco Palace too is kind of, I think, what sets the tone for these be stereotypes. Get over yourself. This isn't a documentary. We're not. It goes there by having. I mean, the Asian lady who runs the Donut Taco Place too even tells Scott, like, stop being such a white fat dude stereotype.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it was self-aware enough as a film with breaking the fourth wall or whatever it is, meta humor. That, and again, another thing too is, like, I don't think if it breaks into a wider audience. Maybe it'll be like, oh yeah, I guess D&D is everything I thought it was. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it was funny enough, and it wasn't. Again, at some point, you need a tent pole to be like, I'm not that dude. So I think as gamers, I think we're like, yeah, I'm not a Scott. I do this to not be that Scott guy, right? So
right, yeah.
And I think that is a good point. It's not so overly focused on one aspect. Like if you do take a movie like The Gamers, Darkness Rising, that is very, very singularly focused.
Yeah.
But the layers and the depth to this movie, that's actually a good point. I think that can appeal to more than just the gamer.
Yeah.
And you saying your wife watched it with you and everything like that. If she gets it, I mean, then that shows a little bit something right there alone. Because I'm sure if you guys sat down and watched The Darkness Rising. So she's like, well, why the fuck is that dude dressed up like a chick? I don't get it.
Right. Again, so it could be her own bias of living with me. She has seen The Gamers. She saw Gamers is the first one, the Gamers Darkness Rising. She's seen both of those. I torture her a lot, but she did get the humor. Because I have no one else to bitch to, because if you're a game match, you can't bitch to your players, right? So you gotta have some outlet for. Right. What's going on? So yeah, my poor wife is trying to figure out, the latest fucking spicy mayonnaise, how to make that shit, and I'm discussing, fucking elves and dwarves and why it's of the utmost importance.
If someone called it a love letter to gaming, I don't think it's that.
No, not at all.
Darkness Rising definitely is. I mean, that's. I think both of them come from people who know the hobby, so they're it's versed enough in the language and what actually happens, but. The Dorkness films the gamer films were love letters. I mean, they and you had to be a little more into the hobby too to get all the references. Right. But then again, there are a lot of movies that I think like The Simpsons is kind of one of those shows where there's the level for the 8-year-old kids watching, and then there's the level for the 45-year-old, comics crossword, puzzle fuck faces. And they can both watch the show and get enough name drops to things that they care about. But the Gamers was a love letter. This was more of a, I don't know, maybe a character study.
Sure, right. And that's why I really want to talk about this movie, because I wish more gamers would watch it. I wish more people would watch it in general, and just maybe get that dialogue going and sort of get rid of the stigmas that are out there.
That's exactly what
if this movie were made today, how would it be different? I think it'd be profoundly different, but...
They would have to recreate the character of... Scott wouldn't even be close to being the same, right? And I dare say that I think that they would probably go a more unfortunate route. Like Scott would probably insult Kendra, just to have that in there. To be able to say, look, that side of the crowd is misogynistic and sexist. I think that Miles's party would have been more diverse, to use those modern terms. because Miles' party reflects a lot of the cultural Marxists now. They bitch about diversity, but it's a vanilla fest in almost everything they do.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
But making Miles perfect would require his girlfriend would probably be black.
Right, yeah, they would have to go a very extreme route on both ends to prove the point. And Anthony, it's unfortunate he fell out because he had asked that, like, did the directors have any ulterior, or the writers have any ulterior motives? And I don't know. Reading the AMA, like we said, was really kind of a weak AMA because no one really asked like a lot of really hard-hitting questions. And so like we found out that the one games and the one didn't, and she had to keep him in check because he would go real nerd deep, right? And that was the outside perspective of like you got to pull back a little bit because normal people aren't going to know what the fuck you're talking about. Yeah, and that's what this movie hits the definite enough. You know, everyone knows what roll a d20 is. You know, that's ubiquitous now. Everyone knows what charisma is. Zero charisma, everyone knows that. Thanks to E.T. That, you know, it means something funny, and it's a pot shot at dorks. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. It would definitely be a completely different movie and probably not as likable or watchable.
Well, I mean, I still think it would be yes and no. I mean, if they were wanting to do it to quote-unquote keep up with the times, yeah, it would be very different. But to just get the general message across of what they got across in the movie, I think it would be pretty much the same flick.
Yeah, I think so.
The biggest thing that they're showing is this personality type versus this personality type. Both of them happen to be type A personalities.
Yes.
But they're just simply showing the guy who made this his life and the guy who made this a part of his life.
Right.
I mean, if they wanted to dive so deep that, you know, they have this extreme amount of diversity and this and that to show Miles' side, it could have been done 5 years ago, too. I don't think there's anything that separates that.
But I think my point is kind of that I think the conversation a couple years ago was definitely over, you know, new styles of gaming.
Right.
And, you know, and Dogs in the Vineyards come up several times. That was such a departure, you know, philosophically from, you know, the way you stat up a D&D character and how you resolve things. And ironically, it's a more, the content was more fundamentalist in the sense that you're playing like religious zealots, which is an interesting take. I mean, pretty brave. I think if that game came out now, you might get, you know, a fear of being, you know, you're culturally appropriating minorities, and, you know, but I think to me the conversation has shifted in gaming away from what constitutes gaming culture, and I think gaming culture's broken big. I think with things like the Comic-Cons, which are drawing in hundreds of thousands of people, for instance, like about a year ago, I think was the first time one of the a social justice warrior game got banned from drive-thru RPG, and on one of those threads, and it was going back and forth on why banning is a good thing or a bad thing, or can we have a game that has these, you know, pokes fun at people who take themselves very seriously, and the game got banned, and I said on that thread. No, I should probably go back and screen cap that, but on a year. But I said, like, listen, guys, it's only a matter of time until the current kerfuffle over video games finds its way to tabletop. It hasn't happened yet, but it will come to tabletop, and there will be these explosive, episodes where we're going to go from being called, like, you know, losers, dorks, you know, beta on the chain of, you know, high school popularity, to being called, like, serious things like bigots.
Right.
And that's the shift in tone. Like, it's one thing to be Scott the nerd, Scott the guy who can't get a job or move out of his parents' house. I mean, those are things that are, you know, 4 or 5 on the scale of 1 to 10 of, you know, things we can shit on. I think now we're getting this, you know, and again, with ridiculous stuff like tabletop gaming as a white male terrorist problem, you now being called terrorists, right? So we've ratcheted up from being a nerd in high school to being like the most vile moral thing you can think of. And sure, it's just rhetoric from a small group of people, but that's a big change to me. That is a sea change of, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it was you can be a nerd if you have a geeky hobby, but you still like it. Now you can't like your hobby. Now your hobby is toxic, and you are an awful person for enjoying it because I'm characterizing it this way. And to me, that's a huge shift. That wasn't there 3 years ago.
Yeah, that side of things, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely, yeah, from that perspective, yes, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't say the word piss without offending somebody who doesn't identify themselves as piss.
Yeah, it is.
Exactly. And so, in essence, it's almost like you couldn't. I don't know if this movie could be made today, because could we have funny gamer movies now? Unless they're, I mean, like the Gamer and Darkness Rising are great. I think they are, seminal, funny things in our canon. But they were made by the right people.
Yeah, and also they're years old as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, exactly, they are. But and here's the other thing too: is exactly, like, would Felicia Day, if she made one of those today, have to talk about rape culture in the middle of an otherwise comedic retelling of storytelling? I mean, the sad thing is that's kind of where the dialogue with those people have gone. Instead of being like, let's celebrate our hobby, let's I think it has gone very dark. And you have to be a certain person to be able to make certain arguments anymore. And I find that repugnant, but whatever.
I mean, everything is like hyperbole, right? I mean, that's where it's all gone. Is everything is just hyperbole, and that's unfortunate, to say the least. And yeah, you're right. It's any conversation is just like fuck to the left and to the right immediately. It's like, Jesus Christ. There's a middle ground, and it's called relax.
Yeah, there's a clock. There's a countdown timer for, like, when is the first person going to call the person Hitler, right? I mean, that's...
Right, yeah.
It usually takes about 2.5 minutes, and then it comes out. It's everybody's Hitler.
Exactly. Everyone turns into assholes. And we can't be racist because we have campaigns with L's, so...
I just love the people who, like, I mean, there's something wrong with being on the left side of the spectrum, but I see game creators who call themselves progressives, and they hold up the most toxic interpretations of things like cultural appropriation. And it's like, wait a minute, I've bought your books. Your books are 98% cultural appropriation, and you're a white dude. If you believe in this concept, give all the money back, buddy, because your entire livelihood is based upon this thing, which, when you use it as a weapon, you basically tell people you can't create with anybody else's ideas unless you are genetically part of that tribe or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sorry, you are not part of that tribe, and yet you're upholding these values. It doesn't make sense to me.
No.
No. Put on their laps.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a very small. It is a definitely small thing, and the only way that and tabletop is so vastly different in all of this, and this is sort of a side departure from the movie a little bit, but I think it all still feeds into it, is that tabletop gaming, ultimately, I can't control what Chris does at his table or what Jamie's group does at their table. So you can rewrite the rules or you can demand all this crazy shit, but you're never going to change the fact that, like, Group X plays nothing but OD&D. You're never going to be able to change that. You can't. That's what the age of the internet. Even if you had a fucking full-on let's hit Godwin's rule right now, if you went full Nazi and tried to burn books, you're not going to purge the internet of digital copies of original Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't know. Other than that,
maybe that's the big thing that people should take away from this movie, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Don't take yourself so fucking serious.
Yeah, just have a good time, man. Like Scott's stepdad asked him, you're into dragons and elves and shit.
That's kind of my point. It's like, if you take a step back from all of it, even the dialogue on the internet is not the real world, and that's a big thing to realize. Like, it doesn't matter where the trends in gaming are going, where the people who write for the certain web magazines go, whatever. Again, and this is as much against the people who I disagree with the gamers who are like, blank is ruining gaming.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it's making you do anything. If you want to keep up the same style of gaming you were playing in 1987, no one's stopping you. I mean, realize it's like, if you're paying the rent or the mortgage on a place, you can invite whoever you want over. You can play whatever game you want there. And it doesn't matter what the Outrage Brigade or the Popularity Squad does. I mean, gaming has become popular, and again, I think part of it is, and this movie touches on this, how many people are tourists and how many people are natives?
Right.
And how many people like aboriginals? I mean, people who like they don't even have the technology to get off the island. So the population come in. There's going to be a different crowd enjoying your little island, but someday their cruise ship's going to go elsewhere, and maybe gaming is going to maintain mainstream popularity. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But at some point, if they're going to, the mainstream is going to change what their definition of cool and popular gaming is.
Yeah.
And even in the face of all the big criticisms, I think in some regards that like the people who aren't going to change are going to go more underground, aren't going to be part of the anymore. But again, no one's going to force anyone to change. Nothing's going to ruin gaming because, and I think this is the advantage of gaming, RPGing over movies, over comics, over video games, is that we create our own product.
Yeah.
So if gaming goes a different direction, if consoles versus PC, 85% shoot-em-ups just cooperative, those, if you're not making your own games, you might get stuck on your little island, and your games might not even play anymore. I mean, you can get left behind. So
right, yeah.
there are people there who can bitch about, this is changing my hobby, I don't like it. If you don't like the current direction the comic books are going, if someone's not writing a comic book for your taste, yeah, you are left out, in the rain. But for tabletop, we don't need to change. We create our own entertainment. I mean, Scott in the movie can be running his epic 3-year campaign for as many years as he wants. It doesn't matter what anyone says or whether the hipsters come or not.
Right.
So the hyperbole there is kind of overwrought too, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's like I said, both ends are assholes. It really does paint it like, Jesus Christ, it's a fucking game, Yeah. I don't know. So, we've been on a bit. I definitely got to take a leap.
It was a good flick because, look at all the questions you brought up.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, and I'm sure we're going to see the comments fly left and right. I can't wait to read the comments. I don't really care.
I'm going to laugh at a lot of them because in today's day and age, we're going to get a lot of, you just don't understand this one person.
Yeah, sure. I don't. Whatever.
This one person needs to become the majority, and we all need to understand this one person's fucking feelings.
Like I said, I understand where Scott comes from, but I also understand where that need for Miles' sort of vision of gaming to push in a little bit and have some of the nuances that are coming in from this new age of gaming. So it is what it is. All right, and that's pretty much all I have for this. It was a good discussion. I'm glad that there are other people out there who wanted to have a discussion too about the movie. I don't think seminal is too strong of a word for it, given the RPG movies that are out there. They're either a fucking play on the gaming culture, or they're just they're mazes of monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any closing discussion for you guys? Talk about your podcast again.
We've kept Savage Cast pretty vanilla, and I think we're going to. But if any of you out there want to get into debating some of the hotter topics in gamedom, drop me an email. Find me on Facebook, whatever. And let's get the great game debate. I think will rise, and we'll talk about this kind of shit. This is a kind of a cool thing. I think it's we're doing interesting work here, talking about a movie and what it means to our hobby. I'd like to continue that with people who are willing to bring different perspectives and argue intelligently like you guys do. So
nice. Yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be good to watch at least, and to hear it and see what the different perspectives.
And that's actually interesting to me, Chris, because I would love to join you on something like that, just because the two shows that I do, we do the whole fuck your politics, fuck your religion, leave that for other shit.
Yeah.
But to get on there and to actually say, well, now let me tell you what I really fucking think. I would love to get on there and do that with you sometime.
Yeah, I think the barbarians are at the gate, so to speak. By being a niche hobby, you kind of get left alone.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's good to even have the views of oh, there we go. They're attacking me. The cultural Marxists are. I think it's good to have them, do the criticism. I just think not all of it is on point. So, I mean, people who are of that ilk and want to, throw down on what it means to be a feminist gamer, come on the show. Let's talk about what it means to be, transgender gamer, woman gamer, minority gamer, whatever. That's totally, totally awesome. Welcome to it. Just bring a good argument instead of talking points and accusations and shit. So. Yeah. I think that we've done here. I mean, we've talked all the way around this film, and I think considering there were 3 white guys who've all been in the hobby for a long time, I think we did a pretty decent job of it.
Yeah, I think it was fair. Like we said, we didn't. You hate everyone equally in that fucking movie. It's what it comes down to. All right, that's it. So yeah, go find Chris and debate the shit out of him. Yeah, he's right for it. Other than that, yeah, thanks for those who watched and for those who are gonna leave comments. Definitely get out and watch the movie. It's like an hour and a half. It's it's not gonna kill you to get out there and watch this movie and just see what it's all about and maybe get some more conversation going in your own gaming group.
Yep. Yeah, like in 10 days or so, Jamie and I and the 2 podcasts, the Wild Die podcast and the Savage Cast, we're doing a crossover show. So look out for that soon.
Again, maybe you guys will have some talking points. I'm sure. I'm sure at some point, you'll have lots of lively fucking things to discuss. All right, again, thanks everyone. Yeah, thanks.